see it in your head. You'll escape, changing what you need to make sense of it. That's what's
Hello, all you beautiful people, and welcome again to another episode of Figureisms. I'm your host, Grant Trimble, and in this show, I talk to creatives from models to sculptors to painters, etc., that utilize nudity in their work. The whole purpose of this is to try and understand with greater depth the message, meaning, and choices behind the people traveling this path to foster a greater comprehension of the use of nudity in the arts. I myself fall into this category, but why others do this can, of course, be wide-ranging. Despite the very long history of this discipline, there still remains many misunderstandings and objections to this practice, so my aim is to alleviate some of the stigmas surrounding this endeavor. In addition, I hope to add some context to the greater cultural dialogue regarding sexuality by challenging how nudity is perceived in our society. In this episode, I talked to Johanna Stickland. Johanna is a photographer, painter, writer, and model from Canada who currently lives in Portugal. She has done commission work for Nick Knight Show Studio and has been featured in Vision China, Heavy Metal Magazine, and Juxtapose. On top of this, she's been featured in the curated book Girl on Girl, Art and Photography in the Age of the Female Gaze, and has a number of exhibitions under her belt. We are able to talk about a wide range of topics, as we usually do in the show, ranging from Johanna's badass mom, having artistic parents, making intimate feminine work, the problem of getting in her own way, the freedom nudity offered her, and the life lesson of falling down a runway as a fashion model at age 14. This is the first time I've had the pleasure of talking with Johanna, and to give you an idea of how nice she is, I was mispronouncing her name the whole time as we were talking, and she didn't correct me once. I cleared this up in an email after the fact, though, so for the record, it's not pronounced Johanna as I was saying it, it's Johanna. There's even a couple times where Johanna turns the tables on me, so hopefully I'm able to add little morsels of goodness. Either way, Johanna is awesome, so my suggestion is to sit back, relax, and let it all sink in. Where I'd like to start, it's actually about your mom. Your mom seems to be a pretty important figure in your life.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if maybe you could explain that relationship and what that means to you and what you've even learned from that.
Totally. Well, my mom, she's like amazing. She's always been this very like wild, like outgoing person that's like full of energy, which is kind of like the opposite of me, I guess. Like I'm pretty introverted and like shy. And over the years, like I'm kind of realizing like I'm becoming more like my mom, or I'm just like, so I think whenever I see her, I'm just like in awe of her because she's like this, she's an actress, she like teaches yoga, she's super like funny, she's always telling like these crazy, amazing stories. Like I just think she's amazing. And when I was younger, like I didn't really totally like we didn't have the best relationship, I guess, like because she was always she would like sing at the bus stop and I would be like, oh my god, mom, like you're too much. And she had this like, because she used to be, so my parents like they met when my mom was like working as a stripper, like, so basically my dad went in like as like a client, I guess, or like he said he's like, oh, I'm just gonna get some food, and then he met my mom who was working as a stripper, and so that was like kind of her background. And then when I was a kid, she made this like one woman show about her like time as a stripper, and like I couldn't see the show, but there was like posters of it like on the house, around the house. And I was always kind of like, oh my god, my mom is like so crazy, whatever. But now, like that I'm older, I'm just like, my mom's badass, you know. Like she's had such an interesting life. Like she's done so many like creative, awesome things, and I don't know. I just have like a lot of respect for her, and yeah, so like I used to just think like she was like so over the top, and she is, but I just think that it's beautiful. And like she used to like teach like uh pole dancing classes like in like out of our living room. Like, she was
That's
just like very,
that's definitely not normal, like a normal sort
no,
of
no, it's not. I
situation,
mean,
or
now,
I would say, and in my experience, but you know,
yeah, and now it's like, I mean, like nothing can really shock me that she does or says because I just grew up with it. But yeah, she's amazing, and I just think she's awesome. And yeah, it took me a while because I mean, I always felt like really reserved. And I think it's like both my parents are they're amazing. They're just very like out there, and they're both artists. Like my dad's a writer, my mom was like an actress. So I always like when I was younger, I always went in the opposite direction of that. I was like, oh, I'm gonna like, read books and just be quiet. And then the older I get, is kind of like I realize that I'm just very similar to.
you want to be kind of a little good crazy almost, like you kind of.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it only lasted for so long. I was just trying to rebel against my like artist parents. But yeah.
So then, what did that experience with your mom? What did that teach you?
Well, I just started seeing how like open she was and how like honest and just confident she was about everything. And then I don't know, something just kind of shifted in our relationship where I was just like, I just felt a lot of like admiration, and it just kind of taught me that like, it's just be yourself. Like that's the thing about my mom is like she creates this like, I don't know, this like safe space around her where it's like you can be whoever you are, and like it's totally fine, no judgment. And it's, I don't know, I think that's beautiful, and like I try to be like that, and I think it's from her.
What that's a that obviously I'm trying to take all that in because that's a lot of information. No, and it's beautiful because I think that it's so atypical, but in a way,
Yeah,
you're saying, it has become something that's so positive. Where
totally.
I think for a lot of people, there would still be possibly even a level of embarrassment that could surround all of that. Um, and you seem to have taken it in a different direction, and in a way where that you've really embraced it, and it's had a positive effect on you. What do you contribute that to, in regards to yourself?
Well, I don't know. I think I always felt like old, like I just always felt really older than my actual age. And I think like I kind of figured things out when I was younger, that I was just like, okay, like uh it's not worth it in life to like, be embarrassed or to be like ashamed or whatever. And I just kind of like was like, yeah, why would I feel anything but admiration, you know, for my amazing mom or whatever. And I don't know. I just think it's how I see the world. I'm just kind of like, life is too short, and you have to embrace all those beautiful, positive qualities.
Why do you feel that you were older than your actual age? Why did you have that sense of maturity?
Well, I don't know. I just when I was like 14, I was a model, and I was kind of like on my own. I went to like Singapore for the first time when I was just turned 14. Like for a month, I was just like by myself, and but even before that, like I just always felt like a old soul. I don't know how to describe it, but I was just like very reserved and very like kind of in my own world. And then when I started modeling, it was kind of like, then you're thrown out into the world, and like living in New York and having all these experiences, and I just felt like old. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That experience modeling, I've never been in that situation specifically, but I would assume you really have to sell yourself quite a bit.
Yeah, it was it's so crazy because like it feels like a different lifetime. Like it doesn't feel uh like it feels like it happened to a different person, but it was just one of those crazy things that just happened in my life. I wasn't like trying to pursue it. Like I was just 14, and it's one of those things that just happens so fast, and then all of a sudden like you're working and you have this career that it's kind of like you're learning as you move through it. So it was a bit overwhelming for me, and I think like because I am such an introvert and I am so like quiet, and it was just a lot. Uh, so I think I got kind of burnt out from it for sure.
So how did you get into modeling? The modeling that you were doing was for some pretty big labels as well. I mean, there were pretty big shows. Did I read
Yeah,
that
yeah.
correctly? Or,
It
I mean,
was,
so how did that happen?
well, it was crazy. Like I was just like walking down the street when I was 14, like during my lunch break at school, and this guy came by with like a card, and he was like, "You should model," and he ended up being my agent. So I just kind of talked with my parents, and I was like, "Should I go meet with them?" So we all had a meeting with this agent, and then things just happened like so fast, and yeah, like I went to Singapore because they wanted to like send me out somewhere to see like how I could handle the situation, but like in a smaller market. And then after that, I went to Paris like for the shows, and then just started doing runway shows. And it was like from there on, that was just like a crazy year of like things just kept happening, and I just kept working.
What time period was this? What year was this?
So this was like 2006 or 2007. I was 14. I'm 26 now. So it was like 12 years ago.
So then you began your modeling career, and what point did that sort of whirlwind of existence end for you?
Well, it was really quick. Like it was under a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like all this crazy stuff happened, and then I just got really burnt out. I didn't really like modeling, to be honest. Like, I don't know. And then my body started to change. I like got my period, and they were like, you need to lose weight. And then I was like, I don't even like, I just want to kind of go to high school.
Yeah.
So I did that. So it was only, yeah, I missed a year of school. Like I missed ninth grade, and then I just went straight into 10th grade and was like, okay, I'm done with modeling. And then I went to high school, and it was like these two totally different lives that I was trying to like manage.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of like out of place as a high schooler too. Like I was just kind of like, this is weird. Now I have to like go to class every day at like, a certain time. And I was used to having freedom, total freedom, like living on my own. So it was kind of a big adjustment.
What were some of the positives that you took from that modeling, that 1 year of modeling there?
Well, it was actually modeling that got me really into photography and art, because I would work with like certain photographers, and I would always kind of like research them before I would shoot with them. And so it really just like opened my eyes to this whole new world of like photography. And like there'd be certain people that I was like really excited to work with. And I just remember like having certain shoots where like it was more creative or like collaborative, and like those shoots always felt like so good to me. Like I was like, oh, I'm so excited to see the photos. Like and I would, be really curious about like their work and how they worked. And like, I just don't think I would have that interest in photography if I hadn't had that experience, like as a model, I guess.
Do you remember any kind of looking back, any light bulb moments that went off where you know, like you said, you've really enjoyed that experience of working with these incredible photographers and you would research them. When you look back, do you see a moment where something maybe changed in you towards, you know, photography or wanting to pursue that?
I remember there was this female photographer who I worked with when I was 14, and it was just like a test shoot, like it wasn't for anything specific. And she was just so lovely, and she was like so creative, and it just felt like, I don't know, something in my brain was like, oh, I want to be like her, like I want to do that. Just because of the way she worked and like how thoughtful she like approached like uh, shooting me, and like I think also it was more rare back then to work with like a female photographer. Like there weren't as many female photographers that I worked with, so
What was her
that
name?
was,
Do you remember her name?
yeah, I think her name was Camila. I can't remember her last name now. Like we didn't keep in touch. I just remember this one shoot. It was like pretty magical, but I don't remember her name, which is really bad.
No, it's you know, it happens.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, and like you were saying too, you know, you're 14 and I mean, I have a hard enough time remembering people's names now, you know.
I know,
And
me too.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So that should was there anything in particular other than just how she worked that stood out? Like do you remember, do you even have any of the images or anything like that?
You know, there's somewhere in the email. Like it wasn't for anything specific. It was just like a test shoot. Like my agency, they sent me out to do like creatives with like, you know, just for my portfolio that weren't like published. But so I have them somewhere. But I just remember like she was shooting film and she had like this little dark room set up like in the back of the studio, and it was just really fun and like, you know, super passionate. And yeah, I was like, oh, I want to be like her someday.
So how supportive were your parents during this time? I mean, I would assume were kind of behind you 110%, you know, being 14. Were you keeping in contact with them constantly? And do you remember kind of what their general reaction to all of this was as you were going through it and even decided to stop?
Yeah, they were very supportive and very like kind of, they just like went with the flow of like what was happening. And I think it's kind of a lot for, well, it was a lot for me, and I think for them too, because it's like they want to like, you know, say yes to this crazy opportunity that, you know, doesn't come around so much. And I think they did their best, but I don't know, now when I think about it, I'm like, if I had a kid, I would not let my 14-year-old just like go by themselves.
To
But my
Singapore?
parents are great. They're just very like artsy, like, oh yeah, like everything's cool. But actually, I had this moment where I was in Hong Kong and I was doing like a fashion show, and I fell so like, I just like kept falling on the runway, like, and I was closing the show and I just like kept falling. It was so bad. And I called my dad on the phone. I was like, oh, this like terrible thing happened. Like, I'm so embarrassed. Oh, I'm going to die. And my dad was like, okay, tell me about like the room, like what's like, and I was like, it was pink, like the walls were pink, the runway was pink, like I was wearing a pink dress. It was, and he was like, okay, well, that's pretty funny. He's like, you can look back on your life and you can see that moment as like a tragedy, or you can see it as a comedy. And it was like the best advice ever. And now that's kind of how I see everything.
You're able to choose one or the other now.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, it was pretty funny because like everything was pink and I just kept falling.
That's a that's a pretty good challenge though for someone who's like for a father to challenge their child to, I guess, to determine how they're going to see the reality. That's a pretty good life lesson.
Yeah, it was a light bulb moment for sure. Because I kind of see things like that now. I'm like, oh, okay, I could be sad or I could just laugh about how.
Yeah, and it's better to learn those lessons when you're younger than it is when you're old.
Yeah.
So yeah, even though it's painful either way. So I guess get it over with quickly.
Yeah.
But so then you kind of exit that world pretty quickly, and it had a pretty big impact because it seemed to sort of determine where you went from there. So you're now in high school, and you said you were kind of used to doing things how you wanted to and being on your own, and now you're in another environment. What did that look like?
Yeah, well, that was like I just wanted to be normal. Like I really just wanted a normal high school experience, but I was not used to anything normal. So I was a really terrible student. I was just constantly skipping classes. I didn't really have any friends. I had like two friends. I was super uncool. Uh, so yeah, it was just kind of, and I wasn't really into art or anything. Like I sometimes took photos, but I had no idea like what I was doing. So it was kind of a hard time, I guess. I just felt a little bit out of place and like I just wanted to like, slip under the radar and just be normal, but then, you know, I hadn't had a normal life so much, so it was difficult.
Was there any kind of resentment for that? The not basically being able to experience normality?
Well, no, because I don't think I was ever really a normal kid. So it was just kind of like this thing happened, and then I was just trying to be normal after that, and then I kind of realized, like, well, this I'm just not used to, the structure of like going to school every day and like doing homework, and I wasn't resentful, but I was just more like in a daze. Like I was, I was just living in my own head, and you know, never going to class.
What changed? When did all that become something different?
Um, I don't know. I think well, I left I left after I finished high school, which I barely finished. But I was like, I'm gonna move to England, and so I like had all these plans. I was like, so I went to the UK and I like worked on a farm and I traveled, and I don't know. I think that like knowing that I could like have my own life and travel and you know figure things out on my own without school. I think that like goal was what kind of changed everything.
That just kind of raises almost like a bunch of questions in my mind. why
Yeah.
why England working on a farm?
Well,
I mean, I guess I would just think, like, so you're in Calgary at the time, is
yeah,
that
I
right?
was in, yeah.
And how big is Calgary?
Well, it feels like a small town, but when I say that, like it has like almost 2 million people, I think.
Yeah, that's
So
what
it's like
it's a
it's a
decent sized
city.
city. Yeah.
Yeah, but it felt small to me. Like I felt like uh, I felt like I knew everyone, and like you can't just like really be anonymous,
Hmm.
or you have to. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to get out of there.
And your conclusion was a farm in England?
Well, me and my best me and my best friend Molly from high school. Like we had this plan. We're like, we're gonna move to the UK. We're gonna live in like a little town, and she had met a guy out there, and but I went before her, and I had like time to kill, and I was in London, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna work on a farm like in the south of, you know, England. So I went to this place that had it was like a farm, but they had like a bed and breakfast, and there was a cook there, and so I was living like in a trailer on the farm, but it
Yeah.
was so not me. Like I felt the whole time I was like, I feel like I'm faking this. And then the the woman who owned the farm and owned the restaurant, she was like very powerful and like very bossy and like get shit done, and she just like hated me so much.
Wow.
And so yeah, but rightfully so, because I didn't know how to do shit. So
I like how you can look back now and go, yeah, you know, that she should have hated me. I was
yeah,
not good. No.
yeah, no, I wasn't. And she one day she was like, I'm gonna go out and you need to make these like meringue pies. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. She was like, well, I left the instructions here. And so she left, and I spent the whole day like trying to do these some pies. And then she came back. She was like, she I was like, oh fuck, I did something wrong. I put too much whatever in these pies, and I was like dreading when she was coming back. And she came back and just like yelled at me, and my stomach like dropped. I was like, oh my god, I'm such a failure. But
Wow.
yeah. So then I left a while after that. It was an experience. And yeah, then I went to New York because I had some friends there. And that's when I bought my first camera, like real camera.
So before we get into New York, I just, why, I guess it's, you know, that like you said, you went to England and then worked on a farm. What was kind of going through your head? Like, why were you compelled to this? Was it something that you read in a book and it seemed romantic, or was it kind of someone else's vision that you just sort of were following along, or, you know, what was that? What was the, I guess the sort of the psychology behind all of that?
I don't know. I think I was just trying stuff out. You know, when you're young and you just like try stuff out to see, you know, like, can I do this? And then you realize no. But no, I just wanted to go. I thought it looked beautiful, and it's something that I hadn't done. So I was like, yeah, might as well give this a shot.
So how did
But
you,
I was by myself. It was like through do you remember woofing?
what is it?
It's called woofing. It's like World's Organic, like work on a farm, something.
No, I don't think I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, it's like a place where it's they have farms like all over the world. You like can sign up for this website and can work on a farm.
Okay, so you did it through like a program then.
Yeah, it's kind of a program, but um, yeah, yeah, you just kind of go there. You can go anywhere. Like people just list their
Yeah.
farms. It's kind of like a Craigslist situation. It's like we need this person to do this.
Okay.
Or yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that makes, I guess that makes a little bit more sense. I'm thinking just like you're like, hey, I'm just gonna go to England, and then like here's a random farm. Hey, do you need help? You know.
yeah, that way.
I was thinking, I was like, wow, that's like, I mean, it's wild either way, but I was like, man, that's a yeah,
Bold move.
yeah, that's really bold. Like that's, I was like, it must have been that experience of living in Singapore when you were 14 that you just had the guts to do that. No,
Yeah,
but I mean
yeah,
that still is really gutsy. Like you said, you're on your own and you're 18, I would assume at the time,
yeah.
18,
I was
19.
18. Yeah.
And then so you did that and that didn't work out very well, and then you come to New York. You came to New York. Uh
Yeah. immediately after that.
And then your camera. So you've bought a camera.
Yeah, so that was when I first bought my camera that I still use. Like
What camera is it?
it's the Canon AE1. It's a 35 millimeter.
And you still use it to this day.
Yeah.
Does it hold? I would assume it holds maybe some significant. Uh, it's a significant value of emotional value.
I guess so. It's also just what I'm used to, and I just kind of liked it, and it was, I don't know, when I like something, I kind of stick with it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just like it.
So then, what did New York? What did this kind of phase start off as, and how long were you there?
I was there about 3 months. I was actually trying to get back into modeling, um, but I was trying to do it like at my size, which was like a size 6 or 8. So I was like kind of in this weird middle ground where like I went to see some agencies and they were like, well, you're not straight size, you're not a size 0, but you're not a size 12, so like there's no work for you, sorry. Which I always thought was like kind of messed up because that's where most women like fall into sizes, like, you know. So
Yeah.
I tried to
Yeah.
do that, and then so that didn't really work. So I just stayed there for a while, and yeah, I started taking some photos, and I was staying with my friend, and I was just kind of, yeah, I was just kind of exploring and um, yeah, doing some shoots. I did my first like I modeled, like did some nude modeling also.
Was
And that
that was the
was
first time?
yeah, well I think that was a bit later. I think I was 19 when I did my first like nude modeling thing.
What was that? The reason why you got into that?
Well that was actually really cool because um I can't remember exactly. I did one shoot when I was like 18 that was with this kind of fashion photographer. It was like fashiony beach, like nude shoot. And it was like the first 5 minutes of it, I was kind of like, okay, I'm naked. Like, this is weird. And then after that, I just totally forgot. And it was really like kind of empowering for me because I'd had all these like issues with my body and, with the fashion world, just like constantly being like, okay, you're not thin enough. Like, I had all these messed up ideas about my body. So when I did that, it was kind of like freeing um, and it was really awesome. So a year later, when I was in New York again, I just started working with photographers and who I became friends with, and we would just shoot and talk. And um, it was most of the shoots were nude, but it wasn't. It never felt like sexual or weird. It was just kind of like, yeah, this. It felt really freeing and really like it was good for me, I think.
Yeah, especially in contrast, like you said, to being in the fashion world, and like you said, even going to New York, and you're not small enough and you're not big enough, and
Yeah.
it's always just kind of never enough in one
Yeah,
respect or
exactly.
another. Yeah, and especially too being at a younger age, and like you said, even at 14, you were being told this, and
Yeah,
and I would imagine there's a level of psychological pressure that is placed on you that you aren't even really aware of,
totally. Yeah.
and then finally being able to experience that level of comfortability with yourself. uh I would assume that's a kind of a liberating moment.
Yeah, it was very liberating and very like powerful just to be like, yeah, this is me, this is my body, like and kind of like owning that because I think in the past I was really ashamed and kind of like, hiding myself and not like really not feeling comfortable with myself. And so just being so free, like it just kind of gave me like permission to be like, yeah, this is who I am. Like, this is my body. This is natural. This is like, here I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get into, I guess they kind of refer to it as kind of the art modeling world at this point, or what?
Yeah.
You're in New York and stuff. What kind of happened from there?
Yeah. So then I was in New York, and I was just started working with different people, different photographers. And yeah, I just got really into it, and met so many great people doing this art modeling thing. And I don't know, it was just such a positive, good time. And so I'd go back to Europe because then I was in Portugal most of the time. But I would do like trips in Europe, and every time I would do a trip, I would like work at the same time. So I would like work with, art and nude photographers, and it just became like this big thing in my life, like kind of not even on purpose, just it just kind of happened that way.
So how long did that go on?
I mean, I still model sometimes. I definitely a lot less in the last 2 years, but like I still have friends that I work with. Like when I go to Toronto, I work with a bunch of people, and like sometimes New York. Like I feel like there's always certain people that like, even if I'm like, you know, 40, 50, like we'll still be shooting just because it's like a fun dynamic.
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, I definitely slowed down with modeling, and like, so I guess the last 2 years I've just been pretty much focused on painting and photography, and I don't really model that much.
So when did your photography and your painting, when did that really become a focal point?
I guess about 3 years ago. Um, but only really recently has it become like a steady thing that I can, say is like my job, I guess. But like a few years ago, I made the decision, like, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to model. I'm just going to really focus on painting. And I started doing commissions, and I started, selling my work, and doing that kind of stuff. And I think by like really focusing on that, like I was able to transition to just doing that.
So as this transition happened, do you know why it occurred?
Um, well, I think when you are, I think I was just a little bit not bored, but I just wasn't into being the subject of a photo, or like whatever. I wanted to do my own thing, and make my own work. It was just kind of that, like, okay, I did this for a long time, this modeling thing. It was fun, and I had great times, but I just felt really like I wanted to make my own things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you wanted to contribute probably in a bigger way. Uh,
Yeah.
So most of your subject matter, you generally is nudity.
Yeah.
And you paint and you photograph, and there is a level of intimacy, and it's, I would say, almost like a softness, and even I've seen it being characterized as feminine, which I would say as well. I don't know if you identify your work with that, but what how did that kind of come about? How did that uh, perspective sort of evolve? What is it that I guess your work is looking for?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I definitely like photographs that are kind of tender and intimate. Like I've always been drawn to that kind of photography. So I guess when I started taking photos, I was trying to, capture something that felt honest or felt like feminine, because I think I think I am a very feminine person. I don't really know, but so I like that kind of softness, and I like the intimacy. So yeah, I guess it was just kind of like, and also when I was being photographed, like as a subject, I always liked those kind of images of myself, and I always kind of preferred those shoots that were, you know, you're talking with someone and the camera's there, but it's not like posy or whatever. It's just capturing something that is happening, I guess, in like a soft way.
Is that a conscious thing that you try to do in your work, or is it more of just a natural response?
I guess I do try to, yeah, consciously make that decision. Yeah, I try to photograph in like intimate settings. Like I really like shooting in beds and, natural light and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it is something that I seek out.
From even just learning all this about you and you talking about your upbringing, uh, the impression that I get is that you're very observant,
Yeah.
and you kind of, like you said, you said that you're kind of shy and tend to be more quiet, but you seem to notice things that are going on, and and it doesn't seem to be out of a like an insecurity. I think a lot of times when people say they're shy, people usually associate that with an insecurity. I
Yeah.
don't really get that impression that you are, and not to say that there aren't any insecurities, but I don't get that impression that you are an insecure person, especially with these stories of, like you said, you went to England and you're by yourself, and when you're 14, you're in Singapore. You seem to be taking it all in, and your work kind of seems to be just an extension of that, which that may seem, that's probably an obvious thing, but
Oh, that's so nice. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's really nice.
no, but it seems very sincere too. I think um, a lot of times people could probably break down a lot of artists, like there's almost like a gimmick to it. For example, like you mentioned, I like being in the bedroom and there's a bed, but it seems to be that you're in the bedroom not because you're saying, well, I need a bed now because I'm trying to make it intimate. It
Yeah.
seems like there's a level of depth there that comes from the fact that you are observant and you seem to be very present in your work and what you're doing. And I don't know where I'm going with that. I think
No, I
I think
really appreciate that. So nice.
it's more so, that's one of the things is as I do these interviews, uh it's kind of funny because part of it is I want to be a good interviewer, but at the same time I'm also really fascinated, um as someone who I love art, and it's really fascinating to talk to another artist and see how all of this comes about and hear their experiences. So I apologize if it kind of gets, I think, a little off track sometimes.
Oh no, it's great. Like you're such a good interviewer. Like I feel comfortable talking to you, and it doesn't happen that often. It's kind of rare for me to just like open up, and but it's really good. I like this kind of style of like interview. I like podcasts that sound like this too, like just conversations.
Yeah, yes, same
Yeah.
here, and that's why I hope to do it this way, is because I enjoy it as well. But
Ooh.
yeah, no, that's good because I hope hopefully it's not losing too many people, but as long as you're engaged, then it's all good in my book. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess with all this and as your art started evolving and kind of, it very much kind of was born from this experience, it seems, of being very comfortable with your nudity and with your sexuality, especially in contrast to your modeling career. And that world, why did it become something so important? Does nudity symbolize anything to you, or what does it mean to you?
For me, I just think that it's really beautiful. Like the body is beautiful. Um, and I don't know. I don't really like. Uh, I love the female figure. I love painting it. I love photographing it. And I just think like I could put clothes on someone or like something, but it's just not. It just kind of seems to date an image. Like sometimes if you see like, so I just prefer I guess the intimacy and the like comfort, I guess, of having an image with nudity or a painting that's, has nudity or sexuality. Um, yeah, it just feels more tender. And I think nudity brings out that feeling. And I just think that, I think that nude art is important. Like, I think it's fun. Like, I don't think that anything should be censored, especially in art, because there's still so much shame around bodies, which I think is ridiculous. Like, even when you try to present your work, like on social media or share it, you still have to censor, the body. And I think it's ridiculous. So I guess it's important to me because it's something that, yeah, I want to do and I don't want to censor myself.
Yeah, as we were saying earlier before recording it, there's definitely it's a very complex subject matter, and sometimes it's even difficult to try and express even why these elements of shame surround it.
Yeah.
Do you remember the time or a time, or maybe it never even happened, but do you remember a time when you sort of lost that sense of shame?
Um, I don't know. Sometimes I still feel that, I feel like sometimes it's kind of embedded in me a little bit, like to be ashamed, to be shameful or whatever, especially if it's surrounding like body or like sexuality. Like it's something that, um, like I'm not really I don't feel very public about those sides of myself, but I feel like with art, it's like that's where I can be bold and that's where I can, just express myself. So I don't know. I guess I never felt shameful in that sense of like, expressing myself because I always thought, yeah, if that's what I want to do, then I'm going to do it. But sometimes I do still feel like, oh, was that too much? Was that too, but when I see other people sharing work like that, I think it's great. I think it's beautiful. I don't think there's such thing as too much. Like if it comes from a good place, a positive place, I think it's beautiful, you know?
Can you explain that? If you say it comes from a good or a positive place, what do you mean by that specifically?
Um, I don't know. I think sometimes there is just like you see an image and you're like, okay, it's a nude photo, but it's just there's no reason for it to, it's just kind of like nudity for the sake of nudity, which is fine. But I don't know. I always just prefer when an image is more. There's something more going on, like there's some emotion or some intimacy, or it feels like there's a real connection going on. And I think that when the photographer, the artist, like comes from a place of like respecting the model or the subject or whatever, I think that comes through. And you can see that kind of connection. But I think sometimes you can tell when there isn't that, and it's just like, a photo of a naked chick, which is fine. Like I think that's fun too. But I think you can always kind of, well, and it's not that it comes from a bad place. It's just, I guess it's a different way of making work.
Is there a line for you? Because like you mentioned, you said, is it too much? Is it too little? Is there like a line for you that you just won't ever cross?
Well, I think for me, like, I do like using sexuality in my work, and sometimes I'll take self portraits that are maybe like a little bit sexual, but I don't think I could ever really put my sexuality like out there in photographs, like for the world to see. Like, I think I'm just way too shy for that. And it's also not something I'm really interested in, you know, sharing, you know, like super sexual photos of me, even if they're self portraits or whatever. So I think that's something that I just like probably won't do. But when other people do it, I think it's great. Like, I don't think it's too much. I think I'm like, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think there always is kind of a line, and it's not about necessarily a moral line, but even
No,
just
yeah,
of what one is trying to explore. And
right.
in my own mind, the what I think a lot of life is about, the way that I put it, and I hope it makes sense, but the way that I kind of say it in my head is that uh, I'm trying to respond to what I find to be mysterious. So I'm trying to respond to the mystery of life, and every person finds something uh, mysterious in their own respect. Like, for example, some people are incredible mathematicians. I, on the other hand, can barely count to my own age, but
Yeah.
not quite that bad. But you know what I mean. Like, I don't have a disposition, and it's probably more so an interest to really explore mathematics. But in my own little world, there is something that I am trying to explore in my own right and show. I didn't know if you could identify what it is you are trying to explore and if you were able to express that in any way.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I don't even think so much about. Like, I don't know.
Or I guess maybe a better way to put it is, what is it that you find mysterious in your work?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think women are mysterious for sure, and like that's interesting to me. I love photographing women because of that. I think sexuality is also a bit mysterious, so that is something that I. So that's a good answer, mystery. So what about you? Like, what do you find mysterious?
Oh,
Like, what do
you're
you?
turning it on me.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
No, no,
That's a
I'm
fair
really
question.
curious.
Because I think about this in regards to myself, and it's been an ongoing process to really figure it out. Because I think when I first started uh, doing photography, uh, I was 18, um, and so now I'm 35, so it's been going on a little bit, but as I keep exploring it, I realize more and more what it is I'm trying to figure out. And it very much is a zigzag path, so I'll kind of venture in this area and it'll be like, no, that's not really it. Like, I kind of go this way, this isn't really it. And what I've realized is, as of now anyway, like, I think I'm really trying to figure out what sexuality is, especially, how should I say this? As opposed to, like, not sex, but what sexuality is. And,
Mm, right.
in contrast to sex, because it's very easy to identify what sex is, in the terms of intercourse. But
Right.
what I think, we carry our sexuality with us wherever we go, and I think we're always interacting with our sexuality, and so I think there's a breadth to it that is massive, and I think that we're at a point in time where we are able to question why we have these social standards, because they don't really quite work for us
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And I believe there's a reason, even in terms of history, why, but I don't really think that they work for us anymore. I think that we can all really identify it. And I think we're trying to sort of all figure out what is the place of sexuality and how can we navigate things, um, or navigate sexuality, and what should be sort of the new standards. So for me, I think my work is really just trying to figure out what sexuality is, and I kind of do that by exploring it just from a very personal level. So, um, like my work that I kind of mostly do now is I shoot my wife, and she'll be naked in the house, and we have 4 kids, so
Yeah.
it's an interesting contrast, I think, to photograph, and it was something that always happened, and I just started photographing it and realizing that it was something that was kind of different than maybe what people are used to seeing, but I don't
Yeah.
really think it should be something
Yeah,
that's odd.
exactly.
So
That's interesting.
yeah, so yeah, that to me is, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what sexuality is as in contrast to, not that it can't include sex, but
Yeah, but it's all like beyond that. It's way more than the act of sex, like sexuality, I think.
exactly.
It's so complicated. It's so layered. I don't know. It's
Yeah, and honestly, a big part of the motivation to this podcast, it kind of has to do with that as well, because you
yeah.
know that's why I want to talk to other creatives who are using nudity, because they're able to have this experience and a very personal experience that is not the status quo. And
Right.
I think there's something that can be learned from that. And I don't know really what the answer is.
Yeah.
But I believe that if we can essentially compile as many perspectives as possible, maybe we could figure it out.
Totally.
And so that's a big driving force behind all of this. And that's where a lot of this curiosity comes, and you're able to have an experience with your work where like you said, you're able to have an intimacy and an openness and a reality that I can never have, even just by virtue, that I'm not you. And
Right.
so, I'm interested in knowing kind of what that world is that you're trying to explore, and why it is you feel you've come upon it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting to actually think about it because yeah, I don't know. I guess like I don't really try to make like sexy photos. Like it's not really something that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make a sexy photo. But like sometimes they kind of turn out that way, and I'm interested in exploring that more, especially like with self portraits, because I feel way too shy to like you know photograph someone else like in that kind of way. But I think like if you use yourself as the subject, it's a little bit easier, and you can have a bit less inhibitions. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, it is difficult when you are working with other people,
Yeah.
especially too under the pretense of modeling. And that I can say for myself personally, uh, when you have someone who's modeling for you, there is definitely a kind of a psychological, um, you kind of stay in these sort of psychological containers where it's like, I'm the photographer, you're the
Yeah.
model, you model.
Kind of the power play or something. There's like certain elements of that.
Well, yeah, and that even the other person doesn't feel like they can kind of cross over, or that somehow it's well, I guess there's nothing wrong with the dynamic per se, because
Yeah.
for example, in the situation where you modeled for, in fashion, like there's a goal to it that is fashion, and there's this whole image and stuff. But I think when you're trying to explore something and you're trying to create art, a lot of times for me it's like, well, I want there to be something personal, and I want there
Hmm.
to be something intimate, and I want there to be a sharing. um as a male photographer, that's difficult to do, especially when you're working with females, because you also don't want to give the impression that, like, you don't want to be creepy, you know.
Of course.
And
But I think even women can feel creepy. Like I feel creepy.
yeah, and it's not just, I mean, from
But I
it's
totally like understand where you're coming from, and I think it's good that you like acknowledge that or think about that because I think a lot of male photographers don't necessarily like even think about that
Yeah,
dynamic.
yeah, it's strange. I would probably, I hate to, yeah, generalize, but I would say that that's true probably for the most
Yeah,
part.
no, I'm totally generalizing, but
Yeah, yeah. Not well, I guess I would say I don't want to like throw male photographers under the bus because I'm, I'm one, and
yeah,
but yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because you're dealing with something very sensitive, and rightfully so, and you never want to infringe upon somebody and their sense of well-being.
hmm
At least, I mean, I can say I don't. Some people might not care, and I think that's problematic. So you have to establish a trust, and that to me is when my favorite images come out of that, is when there's
totally.
when someone is willing to share and open up, and it's not that you're not prodding them or prying them to do it. It's, and there's a balance there, and so all of this was kind of uh, a lengthy sort of response to, you were saying that you were kind of comfortable doing that with yourself, and it's difficult to do it with other people. And
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the reason why it's difficult to get, you don't have that same level of comfortability with someone else as you do with yourself.
yeah. But then there are certain people that it just kind of clicks and it's really natural, and I think it is like a give and take thing. Like you have to be connected in some way. You have to have that trust, I think is the key word. It's like trust and respect, and like that is kind of rare to find, I think. Or maybe I just don't shoot enough. But
Oh yeah, I feel like I'm in this similar boat. I don't feel like I find that much, when you just kind of click on a certain level.
yeah, it's really special. And that's like even when I was younger and I was modeling, like that was the thing that I loved about shooting, like with certain photographers, is that like connection that you make. And I think it makes the images better, or it elevates the images when you can see that there's that like trust and respect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why do you think that that's the case?
I just think that uh I don't know, it just makes everything easier. It makes everything better, and it's like there's a certain authenticity that comes across. Like you can feel that it's sincere, when there's that connection. And I think it just that adds to an image, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a vulnerability too. I think
Yeah, vulnerability, that's true.
I can't help but think that that is a big part of what really creates sort of the intriguing aspect of um, any relationship. Really, is
hmm
that you just become more and more vulnerable, and through that, there just becomes a depth that you can't get otherwise.
Yeah. It's also very scary to
Yeah, yeah, it is.
like yeah.
I I try to put myself in that situation of being a subject, especially too. I think it can be kind of hypocritical when, at least in my own eyes, and this isn't a judgment towards anybody, but like, I shoot nude models and women specifically, and I think it can be kind of hypocritical, or if you don't kind of put yourself in that situation every once in a while. And
Yeah,
so I've
totally. I think all photographers should get on the other side of the. They should model like for a day just to understand. You know.
Yeah, it's hard, and especially doing it nude, and it's not comfortable. Um,
Yeah. So how did you find that? Like the first time, was it challenging, or did you embrace it? Like how did you?
I embrace it, but at the same time, it was challenging. But it's kind of like one of those things. Like I've been bungee jumping before, and it's just like one of
Yeah.
those things. It's like you for me, the way that I kind of address a lot of things in life. I go, okay, well, like jumping as an example. Okay, well, this equipment, the probability of it failing is pretty small, right? Like
Yeah.
most likely I'm going to be safe. Now I might
Yeah.
not, but that's just part of the risk. And
Hmm.
so uh, I understand intellectually that the likelihood of me getting hurt or dying is very small,
Hmm.
and the rest of it is all just psychological.
Yeah.
So just jump, and that's all you can do. So
And that's a great way to see life and go through life.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
that's kind of how I try. But yeah, it's feel like we've uh gone off gone off track a little bit, but in a good way.
Yeah, no, I think it's all good.
Yeah, it's great. But I I guess the question that pops into my head is, is talking about nudity and being in this sort of vulnerable state and create, especially for the sake of art. What to you is the difference between then art, nudes, and pornography?
Well, I think it's pretty clear to me. Like when people have that debate, I think it's I think it's obvious, I think you can look at an image and tell like, okay, this is this is art, or like, okay, that's pretty explicit. Like that's pornographic. But I don't think that's bad. I don't think that has to be bad. I think there's a lot of it is very like I don't know. Yeah, I think it's complicated, but I think for me it's pretty clear. Like I think when there's like penetration, yeah, okay, maybe that's pornographic, but if it's shot in an artful way, like okay, that's art. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
You're turning on me again. I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, no.
No, I think a lot of it comes down to mentality.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I think I there's this quote that I actually always really love, and it kind of comes from maybe a source that most people might find strange, but there's this quote that said the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, but it shows too little, and that was actually a quote by
Yeah.
the Pope John Paul II. And
Oh.
yeah, I know it's kind of weird, and I'm not, the reason why that quote strikes me is not because I don't I don't have anything against pornography, or I don't have any moral objections to it, but
Mhm.
what I think that quote communicates is, I think that art tends to be multidimensional and
Yeah.
pornography tends to be kind of one dimensional. And I think the reason why that's the case is when someone's making something pornographic, the purpose of it is for it to be something arousing sexually,
Yeah.
in a way that is made to just get off to.
Totally. Yeah, that's how like you can tell. That's when I see something I'm like, okay, that's for that purpose. Like it's all about the purpose, I guess, or
Hmm.
intention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and there's obviously it's a fine line, and people play with that line, and I think that's justified as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's I know it's a complicated question, and
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm curious, as someone who works with that subject matter, if there was even, like I mentioned, what's almost like a line for you, if there was a point where it kind of became hazy.
Mm. Well, I think the kind of photos I make are more like, I mean, it's not that they're staged, but I don't know. I don't think I would be in the position of shooting anything like very explicit, like just for the purpose of, arousal. So I just don't know if it's like really in my cards, but who knows? I could like direct a porno like next year if I
in,
put my mind to it.
in England, on the farm that you worked
On the
at when you
farm.
were,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Who knows? But no, I probably won't because I just don't really have interest in that. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's very complicated, and I think everyone has a lot of shame not this is a generalization, but I think people have shame about that aspect and about sexuality, and I think it can be hazy. Like, I just think it's about what your intentions are, and like, what you're trying to put out into the world.
Now, you mentioned your photography, and it's more difficult to segregate photography from in the pornographic sense because there's a realism to photography. Now,
Mhm.
what about your painting?
Oh, well, that I think, I don't know if you can see a painting and say it's like pornographic. I'm not sure.
Why
Um,
why do you think that's the case? Just because of the medium?
I think it's the medium. I think it's, for me, there's like way more, like, I'd rather explore uh, like capturing sexuality like through paintings rather than photographs, because it's like it's from the mind, and it's like you can paint things like from dreams, and it's like, I don't know, for me it's more personal. But it's also like there's a distance that I can keep from my actual private life and thoughts, and like, you're not putting something out there that's a photograph, that's like a record. You're putting out something that is, yeah, it's from your inner world. So for me, yeah, it's a little bit easier to do that with painting.
Is that something that you intentionally do? Is you kind of maybe back off more graphic subject matter with photography, but then you explore sexuality more in depth in your painting?
Yeah, and I think also because with painting, like, it's not like I paint realistic type things. It's very like kind of abstract, and so I think, yeah, it's just fun to like play around with that aspect of it in paintings as opposed to photography.
What has been some of the biggest challenges to creating your work over the years?
Mm, I think my biggest challenge has been like just self doubt and like getting down on myself, not thinking I'm good enough, all those, issues. And uh, I think everyone has it, but I think I can be really hard on myself. So I think the thing that gets in my way the most is myself. And it's just part of like being an artist, is like you put your work out there, and uh, you get rejections. You get people not feeling it. It's not a straight and narrow path. It's like it's full of zigzags, and it's like very unpredictable, and you can't take it personally either. You just have to keep showing up and working. So that has been my greatest challenge, I guess.
And uh, how do you overcome that?
I think with age, like just getting older, that's really been the thing that has gotten me through those times. Just accepting myself more fully, and embracing like my flaws, and just kind of chilling out a little bit. I think with age, it kind of, definitely, as I get older, I care less about what other people think, and I just feel more secure in myself and my work, and like, yeah, it just gets easier. I don't know.
Do you have a lot of support? And when I ask that, I don't mean like financial support, but the emotional support.
Yeah, well, my husband is like the most supportive person. Like, the reason why I do, why I'm an artist, why I paint, why I, take risks. Like, he's just my rock, I guess. And so cheesy, but like, you know, he's really invested in the stuff that I do. And even when I think like, no one cares, he's like, I care. I'm here for you. Like, I show him what I'm working on, and he's always like giving me, his real opinion, and taking time to, talk with me. And like, he is my totally my support system. And it's really like a beautiful thing because he's a musician and we like, I'll listen to his stuff and we'll talk about it. And it's really like this, our relationship is like this dialogue that's just ongoing. And I'm super grateful to have that in my life.
When how long have you guys been together then?
7 years.
Okay, so where did this fall in? We're talking about
Yeah.
New York a while back. Where did that begin in relation to
Um,
New York?
okay, so I went to New York and then I came back to Calgary and I was living there for some months, almost a year maybe. And I was 19 and I was we met on OkCupid actually.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, back in the day, there was 7 years ago. It's kind of weird, but he was in Portugal and I was in Canada, but I like just saw his photo randomly on the site, so I messaged him, and then we didn't really talk that much. It was weird, and then he was like, "I'm gonna come to Canada and meet you," and he actually came to Canada, and we like went across. Um, Canada on a bus together for like 3 days. And it was just like immediately we're like, okay, we're together, like we're in love. And then, yeah, we just traveled around and I just went to Portugal and basically stayed there since, since I met him. And that was when I was 19.
So that was probably like what was that 2000? You said it was 7 years ago.
Yeah, it was like
So 2011.
2011. Yeah.
Okay, and you how long were you back in Canada after New York before that happened?
I think it was either 8 months or six to 8 months. Not totally sure.
So just everything kind of progressed pretty quickly then. Like you
Yeah.
went to New York and back to Canada, and then you've been in Portugal this entire time.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Um, that's my home base. That's where I live. That's where I have my little studio. And yeah.
So being now in Portugal for this has been a pretty decent amount of time then that you've been able to establish yourself, and you have like you said, a studio, and you've been able to really focus on your art. What else has that afforded you, having that kind of stability in all this?
I think that has made such a huge difference in my life. Like just having that support and having the freedom and the time. And also like where I live is like a very small like village and it's isolated and it kind of it forced me to just like slow down and uh, yeah, I just feel so free when I'm there and I just make work and yeah, it's just freedom and time and space and it's and love, because it's where I live with the person I love.
Yeah, that's I mentioned earlier about the kind of recap of your life that I've read the most often is modeled, became an artist, and love took her to Portugal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very romantic, and I'm sure most of it is probably idealistic. What have been some of the difficulties in that though?
Well, yeah, well, I am a big romantic. I'm super into that. But yeah, it was really isolating when I first went there because I didn't know anyone. I didn't speak the language. I basically just had my husband, and it was kind of tricky because also it was in this very small town, and I was just like, what am I gonna do? I felt really insecure, and then I started traveling. Like from there, I was like, Portugal's my home base. I started traveling and doing like art modeling in different cities, and I'd go to New York, and so I'd have that kind of independence, and that was like super important to me. It just made me feel better about that being my home base because it was kind of difficult. And also, when you have so much time, it's amazing to have the freedom, but also it's like you get a little bit in your head, or at least I did. So yeah, that was kind of challenging.
What have been some of the cultural differences being in Portugal? Like, what are some of the ways of seeing the world that you appreciate from living there now, as opposed to maybe how you even grew up or other experiences?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like it's so different from Calgary, obviously, because it's so like Portugal is just so old. There's so much history. Like all the buildings in the village that I live in are like crumbling, and it's just so beautiful. Like the colors, the tiles, there's like a romance to everything and everyone there. It's like there's also kind of a sadness. Like there's that Portuguese word, saudade, you know, and it means like longing for something that, maybe never happened, or it's like this longing feeling. And that culturally it's so unique to Portuguese people and the Portuguese culture. So, like, that has been really, I just felt like immediately when I was there, I was like, yeah, I love this place. I fit in. Like, uh, and everyone is so warm, like, so beautiful. And as soon as meet someone, it's like they're also very kind of reserved and quiet. But then once you get to know someone, like, they will welcome you with like open arms and they're so warm. And so that, I don't know, the whole experience of being in Portugal has been beautiful. Like, I truly love it there, and it's like a different home. I
Is
still
it
feel like Canada is my home, but like I think it's beautiful to have both.
is it that's what I was gonna say. Like, is you mentioned can't you still feel like Canada is your home as well? Do
Yeah.
you hope to get back there and live there, or do you want to just kind of
Mm,
stay posted up in Portugal?
maybe someday. Like, I think if I have kids, maybe like Canada's just like a great place to grow up, and it's where my family is. Like, it would be nice to be closer to them. So I'm not really sure what the future will hold, but yeah, I do love Canada.
Now, speaking of the future, uh, you've had some you've had some recognition and been featured in some galleries uh, or showings. I think one of them, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but wasn't one of them the Girl on Girl Art and Photography in the Age of the Female Gaze? And then you also had an exhibit, The Body Collects.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's all correct. Yeah.
Okay, so when did some of this? When, well, I guess first question is when did this sort of start? When all of a sudden did your work started becoming more recognized?
Well, so I got approached like in the spring, or in the yeah, in the spring, from this by this gallery in London, and they said that they saw my work in this book that was female photographers, and I had an interview in it, and they said like, oh, we're doing this exhibition at Photo London, and we'd like you to have some work in the show. And so that like really kind of changed some things for me, because it's really cool to have a gallery that is backing you up. And I went to London and I saw the show, and it was really cool experience, like, to see that. And then so that was really positive. And then I had this other exhibition in Lisbon that was like a solo show. And yeah, it was called The Body Collects, and it was like 20 paintings that I made. And yeah, it was cool. It was cool to create the show, and it was also really positive. So yeah, it's been good. The last 6 months have been cool.
so you've been able to have these shows. What I was going to ask is, what is it that you want your future to look like? Where is it you're really trying to go?
I don't know. I mean, I just want to keep exploring, and the shows are cool. I would like to do more of those. I want to write more. I want to make a photo book. I want to make a movie. Like, I have all these things that um, I would like to explore. I don't have any specific goals, really. I just want to keep moving along and keep making work. That's like the biggest thing. I just want to keep working every day, even if it's something small, like just making a few paintings. Like it feeds my soul to do that. Like it truly is good for me just to be working. So yeah, that's what I want for my future.
Would you? Is there a point that you? Oh, I guess. And I know this is one of the questions that I sent to you. I guess how do you define success then? In all this respect, like you mentioned, you even brought up your writing, which is something that I wanted to bring up as well. But you have your writing, you have your photography, you have your painting. You still model. You have all these creative endeavors. What is it that with all these things, it sounds like you're very much trying to not just maintain them, but they seem to be all very important in their own respect. Is there, I guess, a definition that you have for yourself of being successful, or what does that look like to you?
Well, I just think being successful is like not being broke, basically, and not wanting to kill yourself.
Those that's a that's a pretty good but that's a very good bar to
Yeah, so that's basically how I feel.
That's great. No, that's good. I wasn't expecting that answer. That's why I laughed. That was a very honest answer too.
Yeah, like as long as I can keep doing what I'm doing and being happy with that, and that's success. Like just keep pushing yourself, like being excited about what you're doing. That's like if I can just maintain that and like being joyful and being grateful, thankful, like having gratitude, that's like the big thing for me.
So
That's success.
in well then in light of that, and this is where my mind is kind of going. You ask a lot of people, what does success look like to you, and some will speak like financially, like being a millionaire or something like that. And I think a lot of artists, though, it a lot of times can sometimes come down to an impact.
Yeah.
They want to be their work to be kind of go down in history or something like that. Do you have that drive or that desire? I mean, no one wants to be forgotten, obviously, but
Right.
do you identify with that at all, or is it you're creating to it's just all very deeply personal?
Well, it is great to see your work in someone else's home. Like that's super cool to me because I'm like, okay, this painting I made like lives in someone else's, living room, and they see it, they interact with it, and they have their own story with it. And like that to me, that is my work living on in some way. And I used to kind of think like, oh, at least I'm leaving something behind, with work, with painting or photography. But now I don't know. I don't really think about it that way. I try to just be more in the moment, and you know, who knows what impact it will have. But to me, it's not really doesn't really matter right now.
Is it yeah, you basically just kind of answered my next question. I was going to ask if you wanted to make an impact, what, or if you could make an impact, what would that be?
Hmm. Well, I don't know. I don't really think about that so much. But if I can like inspire anyone to like be like uh, be themselves or you know, make something that is like genuine or like express themselves or anything like that to me is cool, you know. Or if someone can connect with my work in some way, like I can inspire something or, start a dialogue, like that's to me that's huge and that's super cool.
Why don't you think about that very often?
I think I would just go crazy if I thought about it too much, I think it would I get really in my head, so I
So it's
think it's
more so out of practicality to stay
yeah.
sane.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna think about that.
Yeah, no, that's
Someday.
legitimate. I think for me, I tend to live in the future, and it's very difficult to be present. And I know I've mentioned this in another one of the podcasts, but I really believe, you can only be happy in the present.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I don't blame you for not wanting to, you know, go crazy thinking about trying to make a giant impact, because it is a little uh, it is maddening, I think,
Yeah.
ultimately.
It's good to have goals and it's good to think about those things. And I'm sure with the years I will try to think about that more, you know.
Well, I guess maybe a better way to put it is, do you ever feel like you will arrive, so to say?
Mm, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of that. Like I feel like you don't really know when you arrive. Like I don't know, I could have already arrived and I just not even aware. It's weird. So I don't know because I don't think anything really changes after you arrive. I think it's kind of like your life stays the same and maybe you have success, but it's always out of your control. So, yeah.
I get the so, just speaking to you, and I'm projecting here, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I get the impression that a lot of your approach, it kind of comes down to just trying to practically apply yourself every day. Like I get the impression that you sit down and kind of have a work ethic towards your art that's relatively consistent.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I try to. Sometimes it comes in waves. Like some days I'm just not feeling it, but I try to just do something anyways because I know that I'll feel better if I do that or if I email people or, because I do think like it is kind of my job. I don't have a day job. I just kind of do this. So I do feel like responsible in that sense. Like I have to, you know, have my shit together a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's even a good way to just, like you said, you don't want to try and get in your head too much. And I think by having kind of a work ethic where you sit down, and as it's been said before, you're not necessarily trying to wait for the muse to keep its
No,
appointment.
no.
It's just that you're there doing the work, and if it happens to show up, uh even better. But
Yeah, totally. And I don't plan anything. Like I really, with photography, with painting, I don't really have any, you know, preconceived things that I'm trying to work out. But I just by showing up, like to my desk, like that's to me that is putting in the work.
yeah, it's like you just said, though, you don't have a kind of a preconceived idea of what you're trying to do, but your work still revolves around similar subject matter.
Right.
You mentioned your writing, though, and even the possibility of at some point wanting to delve into other mediums like film and stuff like that. When you think about all those things, do you see yourself still kind of tackling a subject matter that is relevant to what you're working on now?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think that desire is really interesting to explore. There's only so much you can explore with that in photographs. I think you have to have some kind of written or some kind of like moving visual thing for that. So like yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to explore, but they're still related to the kind of work that I make now. Like it's kind of about bodies and you know sexuality, and I think it's really interesting with writing, like how much there is to explore with that.
You mentioned you said the word desire. Were you referring to that as a theme?
Yeah.
Uh, do you see that as a reoccurring theme in what you do now?
Um, Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting, like female desire and how it's not really portrayed in art that much. But I think it's cool to have the perspective. So I think that anything that's made by a woman like will have that, obviously. So I think with my photographs there is that aspect.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, no.
I just what popped into my head is you just said that female desire isn't represented in art very really, and I
Yeah.
agree, and I think that's one of the fascinating things that's happening now is there's definitely a surge of it
Yeah,
uh,
totally.
in a positive way. Like I think that the more the better, and I think that's the thing is from all sides. It's like it
Yeah.
all needs to be represented, but um, in this context of female desire and it being and wanting to represent it yourself, your work, like we were talking about even about before, it tends to be softer and it's beautiful and it doesn't very much venture into anything graphic or extremely literal. What,
Right, yeah.
so then what does female desire from your perspective look like, or how would you explain it?
Mm, I don't know. For me, I guess female desire. For me, I guess it's kind of like how I portray myself or how it's kind of like I don't know, maybe it's more selfish or something. Like I'm showing my body in a way that I want to show it. It's like trying to create that kind of desire. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Maybe I don't really explore that in my work totally, but maybe in paintings more so. Or maybe it's something that I want to explore more.
Even your photos of you photograph even other women and friends, there is definitely an intimacy there.
Yeah.
And also, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. So when I was growing up, I'm from a big family, and I have a lot of cousins as well. And I'm kind of right in the middle, though. So I think my grandma has 20, like 27 grandchildren.
Whoa, that's
So,
crazy.
but I mean, but to put a little bit of to explain that a little bit, I'm actually the oldest of 10. So a big chunk of it are my siblings. But
Yeah.
at the same time, where I fell in the lineup of my cousins, I'm kind of towards the middle, and on either side of me are pretty much girls or women, obviously now. But so growing up, all my cousins that I played with, they were women or girls, and I remember very distinctly kind of being at points where I kind of got like, it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, and I never really understood it, and obviously I understand it now, but I always felt left out in that. For example, I could like we'd all be playing, and then like one of them would need to go to the bathroom, and all of them went into the bathroom, and I was just left sitting there, because
Right.
obviously I couldn't be included in
Awesome.
going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But even though, like I said, understandably so, but at the same time, like growing up, it was like all of a sudden everyone disappeared, and there's a level of I'm not even really quite sure what to say, like how to even explain that, but there's like a camaraderie that girls have in a certain respect that guys don't have, and they're able to obviously be close in a way that a lot of guys aren't. Not to say that guys can't be close or that it doesn't come about in a different way,
Right,
but
yeah.
your work, when I see it, it kind of almost reminds me of something similar in that you're able to have an intimacy with these people that you shoot that kind of reminds me of that kind of camaraderie of even that I saw when I was younger.
Oh, cool. That's so cool.
And it's a beautiful, and I'm saying that it's a beautiful thing, and
No,
it's a good thing. But I just remember even being conscientious of it, as a child, because because I was basically left having to wait for a bunch of girls to get out of the bathroom in order to be able to start like having fun again.
Yeah. Like the odd man out.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it shaped me in a positive way, because I think, even going back to like my own work, that I think is probably somewhat of a recurring question is even like, well, why is it that way? And you come up with like a lot of reasons, but it's interesting that it is that way, I think.
Yeah.
And my point with that, I completely forgot.
It's fine.
But no, but I was
Very good anyways.
I was just what we were talking about, desire, your photography. I was, I guess, curious because it has that kind of camaraderie that I even saw as a kid, how you would define that as desire.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's like a observer thing, like the desire to have that camaraderie. Because I was always just observing. Like maybe it's like not even a real thing. I don't know. It's interesting. Maybe it's my desire to have that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I'm just thinking out loud because I'm trying to understand.
no, that's good. I'm asking this, I'm obviously coming up with this on the spot as well, and I'm asking these questions, in a very genuine way, because I do find it to be fascinating, and I do think that you have a very interesting perspective that is very kind of understated, but at the same time, I think it holds a lot of weight that people that it's easy to overlook, but I think because it's sort of understated and soft, and maybe even that there's a nature of femininity there. And I mean that in the best way. I don't mean that in a negative way, but I think that there's a strength in that a lot of people overlook.
Well, I think that there is, strength and softness. They work together, I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting thing to work with. But yeah, not everyone sees it that way, But I was always more into the subtleties.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think when I think of femininity, it's something that is positive, and even in contrast to, I think sometimes that maybe can be, some people could use that as a negative, but I've never seen it as something.
Yeah, no, me
negative.
either. I never see it as anything but positive.
There was a reference, I said, to your work, that it was something that is feminine. How would you then define feminine, your experience?
I think it is complicated. It's layered. There's more emotion. There's some softness. Like femininity is complicated, and it's different. It's defined differently by different people. But the way I see it is like vulnerability, softness, strength, like all these amazing things that women are, you know, and also mysterious. And I think, yeah, I think it's a positive thing.
And I think it's underrepresented as well,
Yeah.
as you know, and as a whole, you just don't see it that much.
Yeah, and people can define it, however they want. I think sometimes it has this kind of, it can feel like this kind of 1950s, like, oh, that's so feminine, but I
Yeah.
don't know. People have to define it for themselves.
Well, yeah, like you said, the 1950s, people associate it with being a housewife. Now,
Yeah.
I, I mean, growing up in a big family, my mom, she homeschooled all of us, and so I was always at home with my mom. And I'll admit, I thought my mom, like the work she did, so to say, at home was far more complicated than
Totally.
my view of my dad was that, man, he has it easy. He gets to go to work
Yeah.
every day. And
What?
yeah,
You
my
talk
mom has to stay at
like a
home and teach us.
badass.
Yeah, exactly. I was always a lot more impressed by my mom.
Yeah.
Now when I got older, I definitely appreciated what my dad went through, because
Yeah.
then I was in that world, and especially having my own family. But there's been points where I've been a stay-at-home dad, so to say, and it's really difficult. And
Yeah.
I think it's easy to dismiss that as something that's not important. And
Totally.
people, I think, yeah, that's the 1950s housewife thing. Like, you don't do anything, but it's
Yeah.
to me, it's always been just the opposite.
Totally.
It's all complicated and it's very nuanced too, which,
Yeah, it is.
yeah, all these topics. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know when we're kind of coming up on time here, but so I don't want to take your whole day, but there are some questions that I wanted to kind of ask to wrap things up, and
Mhm.
it changes pace a little bit. But what are some of your favorite books?
Ooh, favorite book. That's a great question. Well, I love books. I love uh one of my favorite books is the Leonard Cohen book, uh Favorite Game. Um oh, I love Mary Gateskill. Her book Bad Behavior. It's short stories. I love short stories. Um I love poetry. Yeah, I have too many. Like, I'm really bad with picking favorites, but I love that Leonard Cohen book, and I love Bad Behavior by Mary Kate Skill.
And then what are some of your favorite bands, or what's some of your favorite music?
Ooh.
You can even promote your husband if you like.
My husband is Miguel Santos. He's a composer for soundtracks, for movie soundtracks, and he has a metal band. And yeah, so he's kind of all over the place and makes a lot of really cool music. So shout out to him. And I love Tom Waits. I love soul music. I love Motown. I love uh, Nina Simone, Leonard Cohen. Um, I just like pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Music.
Have you ever heard the Leonard Cohen song "If It Be Your Will"?
Yeah, I love that song.
Have you heard the cover by Anthony, or now Anoni?
Oh, yeah, I have. That's a great cover.
Yeah, that one makes me cry when I
Oh
listen
yeah,
to
I
it.
love that. I'm a sucker for like lyrics, like great lyrics. I love Nick Cave so much.
Yeah, it's Leonard Cohen is definitely, as far, especially lyrically. I mean, he didn't have the greatest voice.
I
But
love his voice. It's so funny.
well, I mean, not that he had. I think that's what
No,
part of the
but he
charm
didn't
is. It's not like,
sing.
but he wasn't
Can't
like a
talk.
singer. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not like, who are some of like the best voices
He's
in
a great vocalist. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, Leonard Cohen is, especially with words.
Yeah,
It's
I'm obsessed with Leonard Cohen. Like since I discovered him when I was younger, I was just obsessed.
yeah, that's a good one to be obsessed with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last question: what does it feel? What is it that you feel you can contribute? Where I'll start over. What is it that you feel you contribute positively to the world that's unique to you?
Hmm. Well, I think that I don't know, like I want to say something about my work, but I don't really know. Like that's kind of up to other people. I think I'm a good listener, and I think I am like a calm person to be around, and I think that that's how I contribute. And maybe like the work I make ties into that somehow, but I'm not really sure. I think that's up for other people to decide.
That's fair enough. That's yeah, I really love talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and
Oh,
I'm
it
glad
was great talking to you. Thank you so much for asking me to do this.
yeah, I've look forward to everything that you're gonna make, and your success at not starving, and you know no, but it's been awesome talking to you. And where do you want people to reach you? What's the best place that they can get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Johanna Stickland, Johanna Stickland. And I have a website. It's just johannastickland.com. And
Yeah,
that's
and hopefully, I can do my little part in driving more people to experience your work and be part of it, and hopefully you'll find
thank you
all this
so
to be
much.
positive, and it'll contribute to your well-being and give some context to what it is you're doing.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone that has listened, as well as to my guest, Johanna Stickland. If you enjoyed this episode and others, I would love to hear your feedback, as well as any suggestions you might have. You can contact me at grant@gtrimble.com. That's GRANT@GTRIMBLE.com, or visit my website for show notes at gtrimble.com. Then click the podcast link. Don't forget to show Johanna Stickland some love on her Instagram. That Instagram is JOHANNA STICKLAND. She also has a website, same name with a .com at the end. There's also my IG, gtrimble_photo. There is a new Figureisms IG, and that's figure.isms on the Instagram. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your loved ones and show your support by clicking the subscribe button and leaving a review. And don't forget to spread the word.
In